Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal-mursaleen. Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd, ikhwatul Islami ibadallah. This is a real talk moment, and it's inspired off of a video that I saw where some issues were being discussed as it relates to Masājid within the black community. Now, as everybody can see, I'm a black man, obviously out of the black community here in the US. And there are issues within the black community, or should I say, Masājid established within the black community, where the attendees of the Masājid are predominantly black Americans. And these issues seem to overlap regardless of what ideology that you profess to be upon, or what madhab in terms of al-madhahib al-fiqhiyya that one attributes to himself. And I'm not stating that every single masjid is like this, but I am dealing with the majority. An anomaly or an exception to the rule is not really given consideration when looking at the bigger picture. So this is the point this is the reason why I'm doing this particular video, that there are certain issues that I think that for whoever looks at this video, regardless of what your ideology or theology may be, that you have to say that these are things that we as Muslims need to correct. These are things that we as Muslims need to correct. So I'm dealing with, Masājid within the black community and the politics that you may find therein that stifles growth and stifles going further as a community, especially as it relates to the strength of Islam growing within the urban and or inner city areas. Now, one of the things that I want to mention when dealing with this is the lack of access to the masjid, especially as it relates to the salawat, or performing the salawat. And this is something that was shocking to me when I went back into LA a few weeks ago. Again, my parents are in LA, my brother's in LA. We live in an area that's predominantly black American. And in that area, in large South Central Los Angeles, at the moment, you have Masjid Bilal Baraba, Masjid As-Salam, Masjid, Bilal Islamic Center now. It's not Felix. I don't think it's referred to as Masjid Felix Bilal anymore. Masjid Abu Bakr. You have Islah LA, although I don't believe that that's considered to be a masjid per se. The community was Masjid Ibadallah, and they established a school there. All right, they established a school there, and I think it's just strictly a school and not necessarily a masjid. So I don't think I necessarily want to count that, and I could be mistaken. The brothers could correct me, right? Masjid al-Mu'min, of course, the masjid that I used to attend quite frequently. And others, you get the point. I've heard there's another one that was established on Jefferson Masjid or Malcolm X Islamic Center. The point that I'm making is that all of these places, when I went back into Los Angeles, to my knowledge, there's only two that's accessible for the salawat. Masjid al-Mu'min, which is a Salafi masjid, and the Salafi masajid are usually always accessible. And then Masjid or Bilal Islamic Center. But some of the other ones were not accessible for the salat. I would be in the area of one of these masajid and the doors are locked. The doors are locked. And so this is a musibah. This is a problem. This is a calamity. As the masjid is very, the meaning of the masjid is a place of sujood, a place where you prostrate. It's established for that point. Or that's the reason, or one of the reasons why it's established. The Prophet ﷺ, he stated, "Innama hiya," and the hiya here is going back to Masājid. "Innama hiya li dhikrillah was salat wa qira'at al-Quran." That they are only for the remembrance of Allah, the prayer, and recitation of the Quran. Right? And so one of the main reasons why the masjid is established, when you go into the black community where there are several different masajid, it's hard to gain access to the masjid because the masjids are locked. The masjids are closed. And this is a problem because how does anybody expect a marriage to take place between the individual and the masjid, the individual and the community? How is the community going to even grow if you don't even have access to the place in which we gather to handle and fulfill some of these duties? And the sad reality is some of these masajid, when I lived in LA, because I was living in LA I left LA in 2013. Some of these places were always accessible. Now they're less accessible. The point that I'm making is this isn't an anomaly to LA, because I've traveled to several different places, and it's difficult to get into masajid in the black community. It's difficult, and in some cases impossible, to be able to enter the masjid. And this is like I said, this isn't correct. This is a calamity for the community. It will hamper it'll prevent the brotherhood from. It prevents from fostering brotherhood, and it prevents from the community growing. Now, the reasons why the masajid are closed like this, every community is different. The leadership is different. They all have their excuses and thus forth and so on. But as far as I'm concerned, the administrators, they need to fear a lot, because these buildings are established for this purpose, and now you're preventing people from being able to establish that which Allah commands us to establish. Like the Prophet ﷺ, he stated, "Salatu al-rajul fil jama'a tuda'afu ala salatihi fi baytihi wa fi suqihi 25 da'afan." To the end of the narration, that the prayer of a man in the congregation, yani in the masjid, it is multiplied by 25 times more than his prayer at his house and at his place of business. So now, if you're living in an area and you are able to walk or drive 5 minutes to the masjid, now that and he finds that the masjid is locked. It's always locked. It's never accessible. He is now being prevented from that reward that he's seeking. Why? Because he can't enter the masjid and pray amongst the congregation. And the benefits for praying the congregation, there's so much wisdom behind it. Like, again, this is the means to foster love amongst the believers that are attending. Because you start to see a brother, if you start going to a new masjid, and or if you're a person who attends a masjid regularly, and a person comes in that you don't know and that you've never seen before, because you pretty much know the regular attendees of the masjid, usually brothers have the tendency to start to question and get to know who's this new brother that's coming in. And that's how love starts to develop. and thus forth and so on. So at any rate, this is a problem that needs to be corrected. And like when I was in Montgomery, Alabama, one of the good things that I saw about that community, which was a masjid smack dab in the black community, is that they gave everybody a key. Like one of the brothers there, he said that when he first got there and the imam gave him a key, because of what he was used to of Masājid and only certain people having keys, and if you just, a select few of people had a key, he thought when he was given the key that he was like, oh wow, like he had been on some type of, he was being honored above everybody else. He was given a key to the masjid. I have access to the masjid. I am one of the people with the keys. And then he realized everybody has a key. And that's because the imam there, mashallah, he was wise enough to recognize that everybody needs access to the masjid. Even myself, when I went there, after being there for 2 or 3 days, I was given a key. Because they understood you need to be able to get into the masjid to handle your acts of worship. But some imams look at having a key as some type of power play. And this is incorrect. I mean, it's easy because where I'm at now, which is a predominant Sudanese community, they just have a door where the lock has a code to it. And you press in the code and the door unlocks and you can enter the masjid, And once you close the door all the way, it locks again. The point that I'm making is this is one of the problems that we find in the black community that needs to be remedied. The people need access to the masjid. If people are acting like the masjid is their personal property, and keeping people out for whatever excuses that they may make, then this is a calamity upon the community. This is one of the ways that hampers growth, that prevents growth, that prevents the fostering of love between the brothers. And this is very important. And this is something that, regardless of what masjid may be, like regardless of what the people may be on in the black community, in terms of theology, if it's a theology that you may necessarily disagree with, the point is we need these masajid accessible regardless of what they're on. Some Islam is better than no Islam. You're in an area where you need to pray. Like where I'm at right now, the Eastern Shore of Maryland, there's only 4 masajid around here. And they're all spread out. The one in the city that I'm in, that I live in, Salisbury, they pray in the wrong direction. So I can't go pray there. Then you have Princess Anne's, the one I go out of my way to, which is predominantly Sudanese. And there's another one out in Ocean City that's way out the way. Then there's another one in Easton, which is an hour drive out, basically through the sticks, basically. And then you may drive through certain towns and back into the sticks again before you get there. That's way out of the way. So in light of that, some of these towns and cities have no masjid. I'd rather it be a masjid there. That's, for instance, I don't agree with the group Jama'at Tabligh and what they're upon in terms of, for those that know what Jama'at Tabligh are about, then they know what they're about. I don't agree with them, but I'd rather in some of these towns that have no masjid, I'd rather there be a masjid that's established by them than there not being any masjid, because some Islam is better than no Islam. Some Islam is better than no Islam. And so the point that I'm making is we got to get these masajid open. We have to have access to the masjid. We can't be prevented from the masjid. We want to fulfill our basic rights that are due to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. And that could be the means why Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is not placing blessings in the community. Whereas other communities where this is regular, people can go in and the masjid is always available, you see them growing more so than these other masajid that are always locked down and or closed. and Allah knows best. That's the first thing. And I don't want to be too long-winded with that point. I'm looking at the timer and it's already saying 15 minutes, right? The second thing I want to mention is, how should I go into this issue, right? This issue may be controversial to a lot of people, but it's not really controversial, and it's the truth, right? The lack, when you go into the black community, most masajid within the black community are legacy masajid. And what do I mean by that? Meaning that most of them were under the authority of Warth Deen Muhammad, and they once were NOI temples. In some cases they were once NOI temples, and then when the conversion or should I say reversion into Islam came, they stopped being temples and started being masajid, right? And some of these places, the same leadership that was there in 1975 are still there in 2024 if they haven't passed away. Now, some people may be like, what? Especially if for people who are outside of the community and don't really know what's going on. This is one of the problems that I see with the masajid within black communities, that there's a problem with passing the baton on to the next generation. Like, there was one masjid when I was in LA, the imam is 93 years old, still giving the khutab. 93 years old. Now, I'm not saying that a 93-year-old can't or shouldn't give a khutbah, but what I'm basically saying is, we're the youth. Where's the next generation who's going to take that place over? There's a statement, and one of the elders back in LA used to say, I have more days behind me than I do in front of me. Why isn't there an understanding that this needs to be inherited, and we need to be raising up our youth to have the know-how to run the masjid and to take it over after we're gone? A lot, and when I say a lot, there's more than there is less of masajid within the black community, where the elders, especially the ones that's coming from that experience, they seem to be holding on to power and not raising up youth and teaching them how this goes, how to run the masjid and thus forth and so on, and passing the baton on to the next generation, basically. I mean, and I've seen this in many cities, that this is the case. Within the black community, this is the case. But then when you look at 20 years ago, from some of the du'at that were like at the top, top du'at from amongst the Arab and Indo-Pacs that are here in America, that were over masajid, 25 years ago, they were the big names. In 2024, they're not the big names. There are people in my peer group that are the big names, the Yasir Qadis, the Umar Suleimans, the Nu'man Ali Khans, and whoever else I can't think of at the moment, because I don't, those guys don't be on my mind like that. I'm gonna have a hard time trying to pull names real quick. The point that I'm making is, the baton in their communities were passed on to these younger generations, and they are affecting people who are in their 20s and their 30s, like those brothers were affected by the people who actually passed the baton when they were in their 20s and their 30s. Like, I was listening to a video of a brother out of Atlanta. I can't recall what the subject that he was talking about, but he made a point about that he was giving a class, and he brought up Siraj Wahhaj, and he said nobody in the class knew who Siraj Wahhaj was, and he said he found that shocking that nobody knew who he was, because from his peer group, Siraj Wahhaj was the man. He said, but when he asked him about Shadeed Muhammad, they all knew who Shadeed Muhammad was. They all knew who Shadeed Muhammad was. And so the point, because I reflected when he said that, I reflected off of this point that I'm making now. Like Siraj Wahaj, when I did a Google search before I started this video to just see how old he is, and it said that he's 74. Now I'm not saying that just because you're 74, you shouldn't be involved in dawah or anything like that. I'm not saying anything like that you become older and you're no longer involved in dawah and thus forth and so on. The point that I'm making is how many from the youth within the black community, like the Shadeed Muhammads and myself and others, went overseas in our 20s. We're in our 40s now, or at least I'm in my 40s. I don't know how old Shadeed Muhammad is. I don't know him personally, so I can't really speak for his age. But I do remember meeting him when I was in Saudi in 2000, I think 2 or 3. And he was much, much thinner. And I remember some of the brothers was Philly was saying, yeah, his name is Shadeed, but he's really a real sweet guy or something like that. They were saying about him back then. Anyway, the point that I'm making, main point that I'm making, is that when it comes to people like Shadeed, or Siraj Wahaj, going back to Siraj Wahaj, I'm not saying that the man, can't give dawah like this, but the point is, okay, you're the leader over a community. When are you going to pass the baton? Because there are people in their 70s that are passing away. There are people in their 60s that are passing away. When does the leadership start to raise up the young? And that was the point that I was making. The younger brothers who went out in their 20s, sought knowledge, and now are back in their late 30s, mid to late 30s and 40s, and involved in dawah, but literally have no place to be able to teach out of because, in a lot of cases, because the elders are just not making a way for them to be able to teach. Or they're not making a way for them to take on these responsibilities. They're just getting older and older and older and older and older. And then one day they're going to die, and it's going to be a vacuum or a void that needs to be filled because they didn't make preparations for people that were younger than them to take over the situation. This is something I don't get, because again, if you look in other communities, from Arab and Indo-Pak communities, they don't move like that, generally speaking. If you go into most of their masajid and the imams of those masajid, they're going to be younger people within my peer group, and that's for someone. You're not going to find too many where it's a person in their 70s or their 80s, let alone their 90s. I'm not saying that it's impossible to find that. I'm saying that's not the majority. That's not what is normally happening here in the U.S. And I don't. And this is one of the things that's mind-boggling to me. Why the brothers don't have the pass the baton mentality? The reason why Shadeed, when that brother was saying he was surprised about that, the reason why Shadeed, I'll give another example. There's one of the masjids in LA. I'm not, it was run by someone who's an elder, someone who's in my father's peer group, right? And he was a leader. He's a leader, without a doubt. The person who was over this masjid was a leader that was loved by the people, by the congregation, and like this, right? But he took the masjid to a level. It was like a storefront. He took the masjid to the level, and by Allah's permission, he never went past that level. He never went past that level. Then his son took it over. About maybe 10 years ago, something like this. I could be maybe a little bit longer. Time is flying by so fast. But his son took it over. When his son took it over, his son took it to another level. because his son ended up buying one of the campuses one of the campuses of a school that was established in LA, right? And they made that, well, I guess they made that the school, but it has a musalla in it. I don't know if they necessarily consider it a masjid or not, but it has a school in it. They hold Jumu'ah there, and thus forth and so on. Now, the point that I'm making is that this brother who came in, who's in my peer group, he needed the foundation that his father laid out. We need that foundation that the elders laid out. They established these things in the late 70s, or in some cases the 80s, or maybe in some cases the early 90s. They established these things. They put their blood, sweat, and tear and established these things. But they established a foundation, and when, you know, younger people reach a certain age, especially when you start getting into your 30s and 40s, if you were a child when they established these things, and now you reach your mid 30s or early 40s, you should be in the mix. These young people should be in the mix of the organization now, helping the organization to grow. And by Allah's permission, that's what this brother did. He took his know-how, because these brothers, the elders, established these things when there was no social media. There was no internet, for that matter. But now younger brothers are coming in familiar with these recent inventions, for lack of better expressions, and they know how to use it to take the situation further. And this is by Allah's permission. And this is an example of what happened with this situation that I'm talking about. This young brother, by Allah's permission, was able to take the situation further, not because he's, because I think some people may consider me denigrating the elder or something. That's not what I'm trying to do. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm basically saying is he came in with young energy and understanding current trends, for lack of better expressions, and he utilized that, by Allah's permission, to be able to take the situation further. And that's what you have happening in all of these communities. So we're in need of that foundation that the elders laid down, and it's upon us to take it further. But unfortunately, again, what we're seeing in the black community specifically is a lack of passing the baton to the next generation. Passing the baton to the next generation. And in some cases, there's outright waging war against that. Waging war against that, to the point that you had, in some cases, young brothers, went off and tried to establish their own thing. Like, okay, these people, we don't know what's going on over here. They're not listening. We giving advice, and they become impatient, go and try and establish something else. And in some cases, they do establish something else, but the majority of those situations end up failing, because it's not easy or a simple affair to establish a masjid. It's not, you need resources and backing, from a community to be able to do something like that. You do have some that did end up being successful, but I think you have more that end up not being successful. So this is one of the issues in the black community that has to be remedied and rectified as well. This needs to be talked about, there was one masjid where the imam got older and older, didn't put anything in play for anybody to take it over. As soon as he died, there was the community split, because everybody was vying for power in there. They leave the situations like this. I don't understand. This is one of the things I don't understand, especially for the ones that were former NOI members, because they came from an organization that had structure in that regard, where they knew, I remember one of the elders used to always say they had an understanding of putting the youth to work, exploiting, and I'm gonna say it just like that, exploiting the energy of the youth, putting them to work, and thus for the betterment of the organization. So at any rate, that is a problem within the black community as well. Another problem is sitting around waiting for the administration of Masājid to organize things that are related to the Muslims but not necessarily related to the Masājid. And I think that this is a problem too. If you have the know-how, if you're going to a community and you're seeing that there are certain needs of the people within the community, you don't need the permission of the administration of the masjid to be able to initiate something. Yes, you want their support, of course. That's you want their support, but you don't need their permission to do anything. If you're noticing that, I'm just using this as an example. If you're noticing that people are coming into the community, or there's an X amount of people that are homeless within the community, asking to stay in the masjid, and the masjid allows them to sleep overnight in the masjid, and you start to say to yourself, this is a real issue right here. We got a lot of brothers or sisters, or whatever the case may be, that are homeless that stay in the masjid. Well, I got this apartment building over here, or we can get this apartment building over here, or I got this plan where we could set up a transitional home for homeless brothers and sisters. So you don't need the imam of the masjid or administration of the masjid. You don't need his approval to initiate something like that. Nor do you need him to spearhead it. Of course, you want him to support it, and I would imagine that there isn't an imam or an administration of a masjid in any community that wouldn't support something like that. But it seemed as if people within the community have this mentality that they have to wear all the hats, that it can't be done unless they do it. We got to snap out of this mentality. We have to snap out of this mentality. There are a lot of things that the community needs that are not necessarily connected to the masjid, and if you have the know-how to do it, then you need to put the plan together and execute. And you just go back to the community and let them know, listen, this is what we're trying to do. We need the support of the admin, but this is what we're doing. We're not asking you guys to have to sacrifice anything, because we know you have your hands full with the masjid. But we do need the support. We need the word to get out to the people. Perhaps after Jumu'ah, it could be announced to the community that this is what's going on, and so the people can support the situation, because this will better assist and better aid the community. Simple. But people have this mentality, a lot of people in the black community have this mentality that the administration of the masjid is supposed to do it. And that mentality, we have to snap out of that, because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, a lot of things won't get done if that's the case. A lot of administrators to Masājid, they have their hands full with just the masjid. And now you're trying to pile you have an idea that will better the community, but you're trying to have somebody else work to bring your idea to fruition. And that's not conducive for anything. So these are some of the things that I was reflecting off of from looking at more than one video, that we have to get better at. We have to get better at some of these things in order to bring about benefit to the community. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. I don't mean to be too long-winded in this regard. Another thing, though, which I've brought this up in the past, is that the Masājid themselves do have to come up with economic plans as well. But I think that, again, if you have a person who is skilled in entrepreneurship or skilled in business, You know, anything he puts together makes money by Allah's permission. And that type of person, he should, you know, put together a plan and the business. You know, even if the admin of the masjid, local masjid, is on board with it or not, if you know, okay, the masjid is in need of money, I can't get the administration to get on board with this project that I'm trying to do, but I have the means and the resources to do this project without necessarily needing them to do anything, then I would say go ahead and do it. And the business is put together, or the project is put together for the financial benefit of the masjid, I would just say go do it then. You know, the masjid needs help, go do it. When it starts making money, you know, get an envelope, put it in the envelope, drop it in the sadaqah box, and keep moving. But you started a business or some type of apparatus that's making lots of money, that you're saying this is going to the masjid. You don't need the masjid's permission for that. Like in Compton, I'm not saying that this happened in Compton, but it was at one point in Compton where my father told me that they would go into the sadaqah box and there'd be a rubber band, a large amount of money rubber band together and placed in the sadaqah box. And they don't know to this day who was doing that. Every Friday or every week, dropping in large amounts of money. Not hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. It could have been that the person who did that started a business and said, you know what, all the money that's being made from this business is going to the masjid. And just kept it a secret to everybody. He just initiated that and did that himself. And what that person did benefit the Compton community, because they end up buying a building. They were renting a building before. This was years ago, over decades ago actually. But they were able to take that money and able to purchase a building. And they never, let's say for instance, if that was done, they never went back to the admin of the Compton Masjid to seek permission to start that business, to be able to do that. And this is what I mean, that when I say that we have to snap out of this mentality of being validated by the administration of a masjid to be able to do something that benefits the community. You don't need their validation, you don't need their permission. If you know that something you're going to do is going to be a benefit, then just do it, initiate it. If it's something that you know needs support from the community, okay, then you go back to the admin, let them know what you're trying to do to get their support in order to bring awareness to the general community. But even with that, bringing awareness to the general community, even with that, a lot of times you don't have to go back to the admin for that neither. You know, the point that I'm making is the mentality, having the mentality that we have to go back to the admin of the masjid before we can do anything that helps the community, even though it's not directly connected to the masjid. That's what I mean when I say that's a mentality that we have to snap out of. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best. I don't want to be too long-winded with that. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.